So while you're in college, you take a role in Stephen Sondheim and also Hail, Princes, Merrily We Roll Along. Then you go into Candor and Ebbs, The Rink. Then from there, you go to Neil Simon's Broadway Bound, and then you go on to win the Tony for Jerome Robbins' Broadway. Briefly describe the genius of each one of these individuals: Simon, Sondheim, Candor, Ebb, and Robbins.
Well, now there's something I've never had. Sondheim and Robbins are very different kind of guys from the rest of us. They just Stephen has this kind of odd alchemy of real sensitivity to the inner workings of the human heart, even though in life you wouldn't think of him as an effusive kind of guy, but he really does see it. And then he's got a poet's vocabulary and this insane perfectionism and meticulous work ethic, so that it all just keeps banging around until he gets this kind of extraordinary expression of what he's trying to convey. And I think because of his highly mathematical mind, his songs have a kind of a rhythmic and a syllabic perfection that other writers are not as meticulous about, and it just kind of sets him apart. So when you're talking to him, you go, he is, if life is a game of chess, he is 10 moves ahead of us. And he's not intimidating. He the first thing he'll tell you is, I'm not my songs. But there's something kind of, I mean, I was very young when I first met him, and he was godlike to me, but it was always a little intimidating, even though he was not trying to be intimidating. Jerry Robbins has an equal genius. Jerry also is able to find what is essential about the expression of something in life and transform it into movement in a way that very few, lots of choreographers have moves, and they have a wonderful vocabulary of moves. Jerry created moves. If Jerry Robbins was working today and he was influenced by hip-hop, I can't imagine the stuff that would be coming out of his head, because hip-hop is very inspired by spirit rather than line and form. And that's what Robbins was doing, but he was doing it in a very formal dance setting. His innate... Stephen Sondheim once said something about Jerry Robbins. So Jerry Robbins was an absolute perfectionist. Nothing was done, nothing was ready, nothing was good enough. And he had a horrible and notorious temper, and could at times be very cruel. And I'm not talking out of school. Everyone that has worked with him will tell you there are times when he is just a very, very difficult human. But it was very clear to me when I was working with him, it was because he was working in a medium where when he was coming up as a student, when a ballet master showed you the choreography, you did as best you could exactly what you were just shown. There was no interpretation. And as Robbins came into his own as a choreographer, the dancer became the star, not the choreographer. And so every dancer he would put that choreography on was interpreting what they saw, and it made him crazy, because it would never be in front of his eyes what was in his head. Because if we had 70 people in Jerome Robbins' Broadway, none of them were doing exactly what he had in his head, and it would make him crazy. And Steve Sondheim once said he's brilliant and inarticulate, which was true, because Jerry probably knew innately he may have been very equally bright and intuitive to Leonard Bernstein and Arthur Lawrence and Stephen Sondheim, but his mouth didn't work as quickly. So his response when they would start spitballing ideas that he didn't like would be, "No! No!" Because he couldn't explain why he wasn't going with it fast enough. Learned a ton from him. Neil Simon was just... Neil lived funny. He just lived funny. He's an odd, married 5 times, twice to the same woman. the things that caught his attention, the background he grew up in, spoke to us as New Yorkers, spoke to the Jewish community, but expanded out from there. He lived funny. He'd be in the rehearsal room and he'd give you a note, and it was funny. I mean, he lived humor in a way that I haven't met too many other, even comics. And it wasn't desperate humor. He wasn't like a stand-up who's always on. It wasn't that. He just thought funny. Candor and Ebb Fred has passed away. John is still with us, but two of the kindest people you'd ever want to meet, and always drawn a little bit to darker subjects like cabaret and Chicago and Zorba, and yet two guys very much filled with inner light, adored each other, and that's not true of a lot of writing teams who have a little bit of competition with each other or an animosity towards each other. John and Fred adored each other. They adored the people they were working with. They made every show they were part of, whether it was going well or not going well, a joyous experience. Just lovely guys, and you can hear it in John's music. Almost all of John's music is has that oompa thing, you know. There's and that's who he is. He's got that kind of little spirit. But they're all just, what you get from all of them is they were lucky enough to be extraordinarily gifted and then have enormous opportunities in the area of their gift. And that when you're with someone who is living in that, it's infectious.